When I was a teenager, one of my favorite shows was this MTV reality series called True Life. True Life would chronicle a certain individual with an interesting set of characteristics. There were episodes such as True Life, I'm an NFL rookie, or True Life, I live in a terror zone. I tuned in one lazy Sunday afternoon, and the episode they were playing was True Life, I have OCD. If you're like me, or how I was, I didn't have a complete understanding of OCD. I more pictured people carrying around hand sanitizer and compulsively washing their hands or just being neat freaks. So when I watched this episode, I was really surprised to see some different symptoms be exposed. There was an individual who would rearrange her toothbrushes by color with the firm belief that it was going to save her mother's life. There was another individual who had to touch a certain surface with a certain hand every time she walked into a room and do that repeatedly. I was surprised to see this. I had never realized that OCD could take so many forms. There's going to be three forms that I'm going to talk to you about today in this presentation. They are shame-based OCD, doubt-based OCD, and just so-based OCD. The first form, shame-based, has to do when an individual believes that the thoughts that they think hold a power well beyond what the thought actually has and what the thought can actually control. They fear that thinking this thought will actually cause the undesired action to happen. A few examples are an individual with OCD might be swimming with their child and suddenly have a thought of holding their child's head underwater and believe that they're actually going to do that. Or what if I walk past a knife in the kitchen and just stab someone with it? I mean, it sounds silly, but these, when you believe your thoughts have a certain amount of power, it's terrifying. And this will cause these individuals to avoid these situations altogether and to isolate themselves. Another type of shame-based OCD is scrupulosity, which is when an individual suffers from shame and guilt over perceived sins or religious disobedience. And a lot of times it'll cause the individual to obsessively pray or confess. An example of this could be, a woman is supposed to be fasting during Yom Kippur and she absent-mindedly chews on her pencil eraser. While she was chewing, was she eating? Was she breaking fast? Was she doing it intentionally? And it might ruin her whole day. The second focus of OCD we're going to talk about here is similar to shame-based OCD in a sense that it does put a specific focus on unrealistic outcomes. The difference is it relies more on the compulsion of checking for confirmation, and this is doubt-based OCD. Doubt-based OCD focuses on intense, disturbing, albeit highly unlikely consequences, and causes the individual to constantly confirm and assure themselves by checking and by compulsions to alleviate that degree of doubt. One common form where we see doubt-based OCD is in harm through negligence in the home. So this is when somebody might leave the house and then have to turn around because they're worried that they didn't turn off the oven. And they'll check the knob on the oven, but that's not enough. They'll have to open the oven and feel, is it hot? It feels a little bit hot. Check the knob again, go out to your car, turn around. Do I see smoke? I need to go back in and start the process all over again. Another type of doubt-based OCD is like a hyper responsibility towards others. So an example of this might be, an individual with OCD hears about a freak hurricane that kills a child, unfortunately. Well, now she feels that it's her responsibility to warn everyone in her contacts list, or at least the people she loves, every time there's a weather event. And this escalates and escalates until she's texting out these texts warning people about a rain shower. And you can understand how that would be really hard for both the individual and her loved ones to know how to deal with that. It's a tricky form of OCD because there's certain doubts that we just can't rule out with with full certainty, right? Like, we can't predict what's going to happen, and freak accidents do happen, but the healthy people won't let it control their life and their mentality, whereas sick people with OCD can't let that go. The last and final focus of OCD I'm going to talk about today is called Just So OCD, which oftentimes focuses on an importance in symmetry and ordering and arranging in specific ways. A lot of times we see this kind of OCD in childhood. Children typically like bedtime routines and will read the same books over and over again or play with their toys in the same way over and over again. But usually this goes away in adulthood, except when you have OCD, it doesn't. And a lot of times this isn't comforting for, well, it is comforting for people with OCD, but they don't want to live like this. This is what we call an ego dystonic offense. And it's when you're stuck doing a routine a certain way and it's bringing you distress. There's two major types of this Just So OCD, and the first one has to do with arranging specifically. A lot of times this plays a particular focus on the body, so you might have to tap. If you bump against the surface with your leg, you might have to go and bump against the same surface with the other half of your body. Or if you're doing exercises and lifting weights, you might become obsessed with having everything be even and take a 30-minute workout and make it an hour and a half. The second type has to do with repetition. So this might show itself and manifest in a way of like having to read the same paragraph in a book countless times because you're convinced that you're not fully absorbing or understanding the information. To understand this a little bit better, Christine Lochner, who's a clinical psychologist, she actually did a study for the National Institute of Health in which she studied patients with symmetry and Just So based OCD. And she found that a lot of this is linked to the dopamine neurotransmitting circuits in your brain. So somebody with OCD might have an overactive, overwhelmed circuit in which the dopamine is being issued in their brain and the neurotransmitters. In a healthy person, you would receive this information, right? You would read this paragraph and your brain would say, okay, I got it. But in somebody with OCD, like their circuitry is too overwhelmed that they can't accept the information and like label it as closed. It just keeps going and going and causing the circuitry to be even more overwhelmed, like a cyclical domino effect. So as you can see, the symptoms and characteristics of OCD extend well beyond what we might have been aware of, especially back in the 90s and, back when I was young watching this MTV series, right? And speaking as somebody who has OCD, it's so validating to see this information become more prevalent. Because with understanding and knowledge comes power, comes empathy, and we can have better treatments and better interactions with people around the world who have OCD. So I know we talked about shame-based OCD, doubt-based OCD, and precision Just So-based OCD. There's countless kinds. But the more you know, the more you're able to interact with people who might be struggling.